Hey, we're here.
It's us. And we have a friend. As many of my friends will recognize him, he's the famous Jay Keaveny.
Ta-da.
And I didn't have Frid in my ear going, Keaveny, no. Okay. That's an inside joke. Anyway, I hope you guys all had a great week. This week we're going to talk about the people we've met. Some of the nice ones and some of the not so nice ones, but mainly nice ones. So, Mark, since you're going to lead the procession, why don't you?
Okay.
Well, I assumed you were, but okay. Let's do this. Jay, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? I know you're from Connecticut. You used to work for the state, right?
Yep.
And you're retired now. Yeah.
Yep.
And,
retired in 2011. And feels like I'm out on parole.
It always does.
And
And
yeah, I started doing the fan stuff back when I was much younger, and it's fun. I enjoyed meeting celebrities, and I usually come away with the experience with at least one or two fairly interesting stories.
yeah, and it's something not a lot of people get to do.
Uh-oh. Just to tell everybody, we've been having a little trouble this morning. We're getting Jay in from Connecticut, as he mentioned. And,
so storms in between and
something seems to be interfering. So I'm sure that Jay will come back as soon as he can. But when the audio breaks up a little bit on his end, we're sorry. It's not Jay's fault. It's just
no. And it's not really Streamyard. It's just the nature of the beast. And
it's the main reason that Melody and I have started pre-recording a lot of the shows, because we found that when we get online at 9:00 at night on a Saturday night when everybody's out partying, there doesn't seem to be as much internet traffic, so therefore it doesn't cause us as much trouble. So
exactly.
I was hoping by the time I got done saying that Jay would be back, but he doesn't.
And he doesn't seem to be. I will communicate with him and see.
See if something had, maybe his phone quit.
Yep.
Which would mean that we are now going to be me and Melody talking about celebrities. But hey, look, I've met a lot of celebrities. I'll give you the background on that. My wife, Beverly, and I, for about 20, 25 years, did toy shows, science fiction conventions, and so forth, selling collectibles. And what they usually do is, or they used to do, not quite so much anymore, but what they used to do is they would rent a big hall, like the Pasadena Convention Center was the main one out here. And they would take half the hall and they would put tables with celebrities sitting at the table signing autographs. And back at that time, all you had to do was buy the photograph and they would autograph it for you.
Difficulties.
There he is.
Good. Jay's back.
All right.
Yeah, the phone overheated again.
Oh. Well, if it keeps doing that, then if it does it again, call it by how you know your phone. If you think it's going to damage it, then let's just set this up later some other time.
Sure.
And
if I might comment, do you have a case on your phone?
No, I don't.
Okay. I was going to say, if you have a case, take the case off, because a lot of times that will help it keep from overheating. But if you don't have a case, well, then I don't have a case.
Some of the older phones just do that. And
this is a new one.
Yeah. Well,
Who knows?
yeah. Well, let's do it for as long as we can, and then
Why don't we let Jay tell some of his stories, since right now his phone is working.
What are your favorite stories? Go for it.
Well, absolute favorite is, no question, Nancy Sinatra. I was a fan from the get-go. And when I was about 12 years old, I joined the fan club. And one of the perks of the fan club was that you got a personally autographed picture of Nancy. And I was in my glory. I showed this to everyone. I made the mistake of showing it to my mother's best friend, who's kind of looked at it and said, "What do you like her for? She looks so cheap." And I was like devastated. At that age, I was still attempting to be respectful towards my elders, but I did take a certain amount of comfort in knowing that her idea of good music was Honey by Bobby Goldsboro, which even at the age of 12 made me want to hurl.
Well, look at it this way. I must tell you that there's a funny story related to that. I'll do it real quickly. Our stepmother had an autographed picture of Frank Sinatra because she belonged to his fan club. So if that person thought any Sinatra was cheap, what do you got to say? Anyway, Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And years later, Nancy reactivated her career after she, put her daughters through high school and everything. And she was appearing like around the corner from where I worked. And of course I was going to go. I got there early, so I got to hear her sound check from outside, made sure I was in the front row. And during the show, I got the impression that she was saying to me. It was correct. And when they announced that she would be meeting fans after the concert, I was like, oh my God. And, I patiently waited my turn. And when I got up to her, she jumped out of her chair and said, "Oh, I'm so glad that you came back." And I was like stunned. I mean, you mean you noticed me? And she kind of did a Mae West take and said, "You were real hard to miss." And then she kissed me of her own free will, I would like to point out. I didn't have to put a gun to her head or anything. And needless to say, I did not sleep that night.
That's so nice.
And I went to other shows that she did in New York. And believe it or not, she allowed me to sing with her.
Wow.
I sound real good if you've exceeded the 2-drink minimum by, 10 or 20.
Well, that's wonderful. And you continue to see her at different events.
Yeah. She's been really nice to me over the years. Very kind, good-hearted person.
Isn't that terrific? It's just terrific. I know there have been a number of times that I've heard of when people develop a friendship with various people via that method. And certainly the Dark Shadows conventions have brought that about. So Nancy was number one.
And let's see, then I had an interesting experience with Debbie Harry from Blondie.
Yeah.
Now, I went to see her in a couple of off-Broadway plays. which I do have to tell you, they were some of the most pretentious, god-awful crap I've ever sat through in my life. But my standards for acceptable entertainment under $20 is fairly liberal.
Right.
So after one of them, she hung around and talked to people after the show, which she would never do after a concert. And I patiently waited my turn. And when I got up to her, she looked up at me and smiled and said, "It's so nice to see you again." And I'm thinking, again? Well, there's no reason that she shouldn't have remembered me, because I've been to enough concerts and I've been up in front. But we also have to factor in massive amounts of drugs.
Yeah.
Hers, of course, not mine. I'm just like this.
No. Yeah.
So that was interesting.
That's cool. I had a
And
experience with someone. I had, I'll make this quick again. I was on a panel about the TV show Wise Guy with the late Ray Sharkey. And we had this lovely panel, and he and I ended up discussing during most of it. And the next day, I went up to get autographs for friends of mine because they were all terrified of him. And I said, "This is for this, and this is for that." And he said, "Melody, don't you want one?" And I don't know why, but it just shocked the hell out of me that he remembered me. And I said, "Do you know who I am?" He said, "Yeah, I just spent yesterday talking." Really?
well,
But they're human beings, and we are too, and sometimes they notice that. And he had just been diagnosed, so I suspect that was part of it. Anyway, go ahead.
Let me see. At one point back in the 90s, I had gone to a horror convention called Chiller Theater, and they had a costume event. So I decided I was going to dress up as one of the Ramones, which was an easy costume to put together. Torn jeans, a t-shirt, leather jacket, and I had spray painted my hair black. I was Joey by default because he was the only one who wore glasses.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that one of the actual Ramones was there that day. He wasn't there as a celebrity guest. He was there as an attendant. So, of course I had to go over to him. And he didn't quite know what to make of me. He thought I was Eric Von Zipper from the Beach Party movies, and I didn't feel any real need to correct him.
There you go. If it works for you, go with it.
Nobody would know who you were talking about, Jay, except for us old people.
Yeah. Okay.
I found that out from some of the kids that I used to work with. I had to bring them up to my level.
The way it is.
Which was,
I'm getting asked.
It took a while.
They want to hear Dark Shadows people stories.
Like
you guys don't hear enough of them?
Well, let's see.
See if Jay knows any Dark Shadows people.
Oh, he does.
I've met most of them over the years from the original show and the NBC revival.
Yeah.
I
love the video, by the way, that somebody, it might have been you, uploaded with Laura and Lizette Anthony. And the look on Laura's face, you had to
Lizette
know
was
Laura
very sweet.
Yeah, but she looked really uncomfortable. I felt badly for her.
Yeah.
She didn't do well in crowds anyway. Yes, Mark.
I only met one.
Yeah,
Catherine Lee Scott.
I did get to be very friendly with Barbara Blackburn, who played Carolyn on the NBC show.
Yeah.
She did a one-woman show, which was one of the most brilliant things I've ever seen in my life. And she played like 9 different characters. She played, She played a goth teenager whose ambition was to look as dead as she possibly could. She played a recovering Playboy centerfold who kept lapsing into poses when she didn't mean to. She played a member of the bimbo liberation movement. And she played a
I love it.
dominatrix. And it was just so clever, so funny. I still quote dialogue from it. She opened with, I don't like a man who is too smart. I like a man who is just smart enough to know how stupid he is.
She is a very good
She was
actress.
such a nice person. I'm sorry she hasn't had more success.
Yeah, that's the way of things. There's so many good actors that are foundering, but she's well respected. I know in little theater and light theater circles, so that has its own respect. So.
And supposedly she had taken an acting class with Nancy Barrett. They were both students.
Yeah, it does. There's so many crossovers with the Dark Shadows people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just yes.
I forgot. I knew one other Dark Shadows. The guy that played Riker's dad. Who was that again?
Mitch Ryan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was at one of the Star Trek. He was at one of the Star Trek conventions that I went to, and that was where I met Catherine Lee Scott because she was in a Star Trek episode. They were both at a Star Trek convention.
And she had the companion on her desk, and he got to say, "Oh, it's my sister's book," because she couldn't tell it from looking at the title. But anyway, Catherine gets that. I tell her joke.
It does have your name on the back, doesn't it?
Yeah. I could go on and on about that, but my grief is not with Catherine about that. So.
Well, when you're a ghostwriter, you have to accept that kind of thing.
Well, I wasn't a ghostwriter. I wrote the bloody thing, but it's not going to sell because my name's on the front. It's sold because it had Catherine's name on the front as Jonathan. So that's the reason
that's your biggest seller, right?
No.
Some of the romance novels.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've got a couple of my second Seamus Bede steampunk detective novel is actually better sold. So, but neither one of them are burning up Stephen King's.
Well, you know what I think was your best work?
Oh yeah, that my first like 50 years ago.
I think we should make a movie out of that.
I should make a movie out of everything I do, but thank God I don't. Anyway, what about, do you have any Jonathan stories that you can tell?
Any what?
Any Jonathan?
Ooh, that I can tell. Well,
yeah, that you can.
Not really.
Yeah, it just depends upon the day with Jonathan.
Met him, but it wasn't all that memorable an encounter. Yeah, I met him on the autograph line, so I was just one of the face of the crowd.
Yeah. Well,
I did find out that Humbert Allen.
Oh.
We've
well,
lost.
That might be it for Jay.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
Jay, if you can hear us, try to come back.
Come back in. Yeah.
It was going great, but
yeah,
we're gonna have to get you a better phone or a fan to blow.
Yeah, we really do. Let me.
Sorry, we don't make enough money here to buy people phones.
God knows. We can figure something out though.
Now, Melody, are you using your laptop now, or are you using your phone still?
Right now I didn't have enough. We've had stuff going on, as I'll talk to you about later, but I'm using my iPad right now, my new one. So
Oh,
if it looks better, that's why.
it does look better.
Yeah.
That's
That
why I
and I
thought
have-
you were using. That's why I thought you were using that computer that I bought you.
I know, I have it. Unfortunately, it totally lost power, and I didn't notice it was unplugged until I was coming in and had to set this up. So next time we'll be ready.
You haven't done the show yet with it, have you?
Nope. But we had it all set up this time. But yay. We
Well,
had
this works. If this is easier for you, this works.
it's I'd rather have the full effect. We keep losing and gaining somebody. Anyway, I tell you what, let me tell my Jonathan Fred stories. I have
Yeah,
a
they
few.
wanted Dark Shadow stories. I have none.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you have better ones with other people, but I'll tell the ones that I think might be of interest. Jonathan Fred, I didn't attend any Dark Shadows related conventions until, is it ShadowCon 4 or 5? And that was like 82, 83 maybe. And no, I think it was earlier than that, maybe 81. Anyway, he walked in, and we had none of us had met him before. And he walked in the room, and everybody stood up. It was like the president walking in. Oh, good, we have Jay back. Yay!
So,
Come on,
bag of ice. Get you a bag of ice and sit it next to your phone.
there you go. Sit the phone on that actually might work. All right, let me. I was in the midst of talking about my first Jonathan Fred encounter. So anyway, we went. He came in, and we all stood up and applauded him, and because I was the totem gopher for a couple of people who were prominent in fandom, who were friends of mine, and I had to carry something around, and I leaned over. I was helping with the autograph line, so I leaned over and got an autograph from him. And he looked at the picture. He said, "Oh, I hate this." And I said, "Shoot me, it was cheap." And he cracked up. So I got in good early with him. So he signed it. And of course, he was younger then, so he wasn't nearly as grumpy as he got in later years. But I went to, when he was doing the one-man show, I went to his apartment with everybody else a couple of times. And he was always very civil and nice to me. I suspect because of my connections to other people. But anyway, that was my Jonathan Fred. Go for it.
well, this isn't my story. This happened to Helen Samaras, and I'm sure she won't mind me sharing it.
Hi, Helen.
She had a pool party at her house, and Jonathan was there. And he told people that they didn't know how to properly get on one of the pool floats. So he decided to show them how to do it. And unfortunately, as he mounted the float, his trunk slipped and he mooned the entire gathering. This was before, of course, phones were everywhere. So
Nobody got a picture.
His posterior was not shown for posterity.
I like that. Posterior for posterity.
Very good. Well, there was the story. I'm sure you've heard this one. Nancy Kersey tells it. I was there when this happened, but he was out at poolside at the Dallas Dark Shadows convention, and it was 100 degrees, and it was midnight. It was just horrible. So we're all sitting around the pool, and the people who are just fans, not working with the convention, were sitting there staring over at him. Well, those of us who work with the convention know not to stare at Jonathan. So we're all just sitting around. And there was also a knife fight that sprung up in the middle of it. And they got them out of there. But it was time to go in, and Nancy went over and shook his shoulder, because she was his assistant. And he looked at me, he says, "Well, I'm awake. Party, party, party." And he was very himself. And all of these people are turning around looking like. So we had to kind of usher him. Well, Nancy ushered him in. I stayed as far away as possible because he could get kind of grumpy in those situations. But anyway, he in many cases he was a very nice man, and he was always a good man in my estimation. He never stole things. He didn't, there were plenty of, a couple of the people who attended conventions who would steal off the tables. And
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Jay knows who I'm talking about.
Unfortunately, yeah.
And but Jonathan never did anything. Of course, he was, fairly wealthy, but he treated everybody with respect. If he did get grumpy with them, he would tend to go to them afterwards and apologize. And but he didn't always do that. So anyway, I know nobody has any Grayson stories. I think I'm the only one. Beth too. Beth Clapper. Marcy is gone now, but those of us who went to the Grayson gathering, as we called it, and those of us who went to the dinner afterward, which I did because I was in the hospital for the Grayson gathering, but she was very much like Jonathan. She was a New Yorker. She was very tough and very straightforward, but also a good person. And she backed me up 100% all the time. And she could be a real something or other at times, but she was 100% on my side. And that's the important thing. Anyway, next story. How about, you said you've met Nancy Barrett?
Yeah.
Yeah. And any good occasions with her?
Well, I have one pretty funny thing because I had talked to her about One Life to Live, which she had been on as two different characters, because I figured she probably was sick and tired of answering Dark Shadows questions.
Yes.
And I asked her what it was like working with Tommy Lee Jones. And she went, "Tommy Lee Jones? Huh. We all thought he was just such a schmuck." Well, he's a schmuck with an Oscar, but...
Yeah. The thing about Tommy Lee, I actually know people who know him. He's, I don't know if this is widely known, he's autistic. And
did not know that.
He's a brilliant man. In fact, they had 12,000 entrants for one position at a school when he was going to this, or applying to this theatrical type of high school. And he actually beat out all the other people to get in. He was that intelligent, and he has absolutely no social skills. He is the rudest person in the world when you meet him.
That's autism.
What's that? Yeah,
that's
autism. Exactly. And he also has a very bad drinking problem. So the two combined do not make for a very, but he's a nice man when you talk to him one-to-one, and when you're not a reporter.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that autistic people don't like is answering questions.
Yeah.
So interviewing somebody that's autistic, you're asking for trouble.
Yeah. That's why they don't let him do it.
I have a family member that's autistic, so I have some knowledge of the subject.
And he's very straightforward. He'll tell you exactly what he's thinking at the moment. And that's not necessarily, what you want to hear, but it's they're good people. That's just the nature of their neurological makeup, And I have no doubt they thought Tommy Lee was a schmuck because he had just come out of, he was educated at Harvard, so. And in fact, who has really great stories about him is John Lithgow. They always talk about Tommy Lee being Al Gore's roommate. Well, what they don't say is that the other roommate in the 3-room situation was John Lithgow. He has
That must have been interesting.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He has said that Tommy Lee is the least homophobic person he's ever met in his life. He actually punched out somebody who tried to beat up a gay guy one time. So Tommy's heart is in the right place. It's just his mouth is. He's not. And I suspect that's the case with.
We just lost Jay again.
And I just talked my way through the whole thing. I'm sorry.
Well, while we're waiting for Jay to come back, I'll tell a little story.
Yeah, you tell your story.
Melody mentioned that Jonathan Fred didn't care for this picture that somebody brought for him to sign. Was that your picture?
Yeah.
Well, Beverly and I happened to have the table next to Gil Gerard and Aaron Gray from Buck Rogers. Well, Aaron Gray, what a lot of people don't know, when Aaron Gray was a teenager, she was a nudist. And she went with her family to nudist events. And apparently a few photographs were taken of Aaron when she was like 12 or 13 years old at these nudist events. Well, somebody somehow got a hold of one of these photographs and actually had the gall to bring it to her to have it autographed. Well, she had him thrown out of the the hall. She should have had him arrested for carrying around a picture of a 12-year-old.
That's kiddie porn.
No kidding.
Oh my
God. Like how could somebody have that idea that would be okay?
Exactly. Oh,
and, so that's my Aaron Gray story. She was beside herself. Apparently, I talked to her afterwards, and she said that had happened to her before.
Oh my God!
She says, yeah, that picture haunts me. She says, I don't know how many people I've had, bring that to her attention. Did you know there's a naked picture of you on the internet?
Like they wouldn't know.
Yeah, I know. She said she had spent a lot of money trying to get it removed, but you can't get something removed from the internet.
No, God, no.
Because somebody in Romania has a copy of it. How are you? You'd have to have the world police go after them.
Exactly.
Is Jay back?
Yeah. Jay, I'm so sorry. Here you were telling your story, and I opened my mouth.
Oh, no biggie.
No, go right ahead, though.
Okay. Well, before Nancy Barrett ever came to a convention, Helen and I and a couple of other friends had gone to see her in this off-Broadway play. $10 ticket, how bad could it be? And it was so funny. Dysfunctional Southern sisters. And I thought it was hilarious. And this guy sitting a couple of seats away from me kept looking over at me and smiling every time I laughed. I was like, well, it's New York Theater. Is he trying to pick me up? Well, it turns out he was the author. And we struck up a friendship. Each flew me out to talk to us after the performance, and she had noticed us during the show. She noticed me, let's face it. And the stories poured out of her. And when I happened to mention to her that once upon a time, many, many years ago, I had played Carol, and her eyes just bulged like, you? And I'm like, yeah. And from that point on, she was not an actress holding court. She was just enjoying the interaction.
The moment, yeah. That's when you get the best stories, the best interactions, is when they go past the talking down and turn into the talking with. It doesn't happen often with actors, but it can.
Yeah.
Did you ever meet Joan Bennett?
Briefly.
Yeah.
It was the first convention she was at, and she wasn't as sharp as she was at some of the later ones.
Yeah.
When
she hadn't quite got
the when she was on her game, she was funny as hell. Do you remember the time when Catherine was going on about how everybody looked forward to going to work and we all loved each other and we couldn't wait to see each other the next day? And Joan grabbed the mic and said, "And what show were you on, dear?"
Yeah, I told Catherine that I think Joan was channeling Grayson. Because that's what Grayson would have said. Poor Catherine, that's kind of her job, is to, give the BS side of things. Did everybody freeze on me? No, Mark didn't. Okay.
No.
Oh, good. It's probably just my eyes.
I'm just sitting still.
Okay.
Mm.
Joan was a lot of fun in later years, as always, but she was a lot of fun. How about Louis? You must have some good Louis.
Yeah. Helen took a bunch of us out to his house on Long Island once, and that was quite the experience.
Yeah.
Someone was using the bathroom in the house, and someone was using the bathroom in the guest cottage, and Louis apparently had to go. So he just relieved himself right then and there on the lawn.
There
Again,
you go.
nobody got pictures of that either.
Well, that's good.
Indeed.
We're, of course, talking about Louis Edmonds. He was just great fun and one of the good people of the world. I once provided him sleepwear. One of his bags had gotten lost and he had nothing to sleep in. So I had these big old, what do you call them, Prodigy t-shirts. I was a Prodigy mem rep. So he said, "May I have one of those?" And I said, "Yeah, you can have 2 or 3. So I saw him later that night. He was walking to the ice machine wearing the Prodigy t-shirt. So he was a lovely man. And
I remember the first convention he ever attended. Nobody really knew much about him, and they didn't know how funny he could be. And someone asked him how he felt when, during the show, Anjali turned his character into a cat. And he just said, "Well, I rather liked it because I'd never quite thought of myself as a pussy before."
I know, I remember. He would say things that were so off the wall. And the newer people were expecting Roger, Mr. Hello.
Dour, sincere businessman.
Exactly. And Louis was so not that. He was
no.
such a fun person. And let's see who. I just thought of them a moment ago. Laura. Do you have any good Laura stories? Laura Parker.
Diana Lara?
Yeah.
Yeah. There was this time that the Dark Shadows ladies appeared at Chiller Theater. It was
Yeah.
Catherine, Lara, Marie Wallace, and Diana Millay. Diana really didn't quite understand what the event was all about. They were not interested in her cookbook. They weren't interested in her primitive artwork. And she kind of get bent out of shape when somebody asked who she was. Which I'm sure Shadows person, you're not really going to know. So they were doing a Q&A, and somebody asked Diana why she didn't act anymore. And she, well, when you're doing a play, you have to be there and you have to give a performance and you have to be there every night to deliver it. And Lara just looked at her and said, you mean it was like having a job?
Oh, I like that.
I was roaring in my seat over that one. And Lara was always nice to me.
Yeah. Laura is the very fact that Catherine and Laura were friends kind of just amazes me, because Catherine has always been everything's good, and Laura's always been bite me.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
They both are good people in their own way, and I've always, Laura and Grayson didn't get along very well, and whereas Catherine and Laura did, Catherine and Grayson did, and I can see why, but I like them both for various different reasons. And I must say, the one Diana story I have was before she sort of got tired of everything and had gone through Egypt with everybody. She someone had done this painting of Grayson. I think it was Barbara Pfister-Lutz. And she walked past it and she says, Grayson was so homely, she was beautiful. And the person sitting with me cracked up and said, Diana, you know who this lady is? No. She ran her fan club. And I said, I don't care. I wasn't her fan because of what she looked like.
Diana.
And Diana said, well, I didn't mean it. And I said, no, that's okay. You're both in the same category. So she kind of whooshed away. But I wouldn't have been that upset, except
I remember my first meeting with Lara Parker. I asked her about one of her films, because she had worked with Brian De Palma before he was anybody. And I said, would you have thought he'd be that successful? And she said, no, absolutely not. Because he allegedly kept asking her to do stuff she didn't want to do. And me being me, I said, well, what do you want you to do? Drop your drawers? And she kind of looked. And then she went, yeah. And she laughed, but it wasn't the Angelique laugh. It was a real laugh.
Yeah.
And that sort of established the relationship that we had from there on out.
Was it that awful movie with De Niro?
I believe so.
Yeah. I wondered if that I saw it listed on the top 50 worst movies. When you're like in the middle of the evening and there's nothing else on, you switch on one of those things. And I thought I saw her in it. And oh my God, that's horrible. But yeah, I'm sorry to hear she had to deal with that. It's nothing any actor should have to do with. But then again, that's how Grayson forgot all about making Satan in high heels.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, if he asked her to
Ooh.
drop her drawers
Yeah.
not on screen, that's terrible. But if it was part of the movie, you know,
but it wasn't.
that
He was known for that.
he should have been tossed.
Yeah.
Well, see, unfortunately, that's just part of Hollywood. They act like, oh, that's the days gone by. Bullshit. It's
Well, look
not.
at Gene.
Oh, we
Look at
lost
Gene
him.
Roddenberry. He
Yeah,
slept with everybody on Star Trek. Although none of them ever claimed that he put pressure on them. He just
yeah,
they all said they loved him afterwards. So
yeah. Yeah, I don't remember Deke Kelly saying.
no, he didn't sleep with D. Kelly, but
Not the
he
guys.
slept with
No.
Nichelle Nichols and Grace Lee Whitney and Major Barrett. And
Yeah,
I think there was one other one too.
probably so.
All at the same time, which is how do you manage that?
Well, yeah, and he was. It's not like he was 14. He was like old. So
He was probably in his 40s, I think, when that was
yeah,
going
I see
on.
that. I mean, it's not
But, you
old.
know, he
Old.
was
It's not grandpa old.
no, he was in his 40s. But you know, he was a powerful man. He held their careers in his hand. So
Yeah, that's
you
the
know,
very reason why he shouldn't have been doing that. But different days back then.
well, one of them married him.
Yeah, I know. Not that stopped his activities, but
I don't know. I never heard whether he was sleeping around after he got married or not. But like I said, they all talk about him like they loved him. So
well, they pretty much had to. No,
okay, now here's somebody else I knew. Do you recognize him?
I do not.
He is Irwin 88 Keys. You know, 88 keys for the piano.
Yeah,
His last
yeah.
name was Keys.
Ah.
And he played one of Fred's Lodge brothers in the Flintstones movie.
Oh, okay.
He was
Yeah, he
bowling
looks
with
like the
Fred,
type.
and he had the big horns on his head. And he was
Right.
in a bunch of stuff, playing a gangster, and a real nice guy. He died real young.
Oh,
Died not maybe 2 years after this, which was
really?
sad.
That's horrible.
Let's see. So that's there's Kent McCord, the gray-haired guy. Used
Yeah.
to be on Adam 12.
Yeah, I remember.
And the guy sitting down is William Wyndham.
Oh, yeah, he was a very
He was
big
a
star.
pretty big star
when
at
we were
one
kids.
time.
Yep.
And the lady talking to him was I don't know her name. She played the nosy neighbor on Bewitched.
Oh, the one who was
And-
married to our neighbor.
Gladys
Yeah,
Kravitz.
George Tobias.
Yeah, George
Yeah,
Tobias
she was married to George Tobias on the show.
on the
and-
show. Yeah.
Sandra Gould or
just so-
Alice Pierce?
The first one.
Alice Pierce.
Yeah.
And
We lived
Melody
in Big
and
Bear
I-
at one time.
yeah, we knew George Tobias. He lived right by us in Big Bear.
He lived down with the normal people, not on the movie star side.
Yeah, all the movie stars like Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. All lived over in Snow Summit,
Yeah.
and George lived over in our neck of the woods. Although Moonridge, that's where the Riddles lived.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Melody and I went to school with Nelson Riddle's kids.
And his daughter Cecily was my best friend. So I got to meet Frank Sinatra Jr. because of that. And
Linda Ronstadt, didn't you?
and Linda Ronstadt and a few
Because
people.
Nelson Riddle was her personal
Yeah. Her band
band
leader.
leader. Yeah.
And never got to meet Frank though.
And he wrote, well, I met Frank Sinatra Jr. He
I
wasn't
met Frank Jr., yeah.
he wasn't a guest of the convention I was at, they had James Darren and Robert Colbert there for their roles on Time Tunnel. It
Yep.
was a sci-fi convention. And I guess Frank Sinatra Jr. and James Darren were friends. And
Yeah,
he
they
came there to see James Darren. And James Darren ended up being a lounge singer on Deep Space Nine later on.
I didn't know who he was, but he was. We were at Frank Jr.'s birthday party, and Cecily was there, to see her dad. We weren't at the party. We were in the bottom basement area that was the playroom. But he was there. I remember he was one of the people there. But I must say, an interesting thing too, because we're coming up on the top of the hour. So I want to thank Jay for hanging in there with us. That has not been an easy thing, I know.
Thank you, Jay. A lot of people want to quit.
Yeah, we've had people quit.
Oh, please. This has been a blast. Aside from the technical difficulties.
Yeah, it's always fun.
We got to do it again when you get your technical problems ironed out.
Yeah,
well, we'll see.
Let's give our worst stories, shall we?
I didn't hear what you said.
Let's tell our worst celebrity stories.
Ooh.
Our worst run-ins. You want to do that, or shall we go another direction?
Well, the Robert Vaughn story was probably the worst.
Yeah, that's sad. What a jerk. Well, unfortunately, some people. Andrew Prine
was probably mine. He was a jerk.
Yeah.
I never like to say that. I didn't like to badmouth celebrities, but he's dead now. So I think I can say he was a jerk. He wouldn't autograph anything unless you paid him. And back at that time, the standard way of doing things is you bought the photograph and they would autograph it for free.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time they charged 10. If they were like a nobody, they charged $10. And if they had been somebody, let's face it, if you're at the conventions, you're not really somebody anymore.
Not anymore. No.
You've slipped off the top of the ladder and you're down a few rungs. And they had people like Richard Hurd and Gil Gerard and Gary Lockwood. Well, Gary Lockwood's career kind of went to hell because he had this big spot on his head, like a Gorbachev mark on his head. I don't know where that came from, but I'm sure that put an end to his acting career.
Well, did you ever see the episode he did on Love American Style when he was still married to Stephanie Powers?
I don't think so.
And I don't remember
it's unique. The concept of the episode was that Stephanie said that his mouth wasn't big enough for kissing, so he decides to expand it. And he spends the bulk of the episode on his knees with a doorknob in his mouth.
I remember that. Very strange.
It's
bizarre.
Mere coincidence that they divorced not long after that.
Well,
I liked her. She was the girl from Uncle.
Yes, she was. Lovely person. Looks damn good for her age, too.
You think Nancy would be your favorite person you met?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. How about you, Mark?
Linda Blair.
Linda
Blair. She was sweet. I'll tell you another person who was really nice was Yvonne Craig.
Oh yeah.
She charged $30 for her autograph, and then she apologized and said, I'm raising money for this. It was for almost a lot of the female celebrities raise money for pet adoption agencies and things. And that's what she was raising money for. And she says, I promised them I wouldn't do any autographs without charging. So she was apologizing. She was a real nice lady.
Yeah, she did a convention in New York where she had a gathering of fans where we just sat and talked with her. And since I knew more about her than anybody else, I got to talk a lot. She, the infamous Mars Needs Women. So I had her sign on a still, Mars Needs Men too.
Oh, that's sweet. Well, I think my worst one was probably Ben Cross. We interviewed him in relation to the companion, and he was just. I think I got him on a bad day though. He said, and at the time he was fairly nice. Dark Shadows related, probably other original OG DS, probably Roger Davis, but that doesn't surprise anybody. However, Roger has been a lot better these days since he's gone through some problems. But
he was the replacement for Jeffrey Duell, wasn't he?
And Peter Duell.
Yeah.
Peter. Jeffrey was the guy that replaced Roger Davis.
They couldn't get rid of Roger Davis.
Yeah.
Yeah, Roger is just he's a case in point in many respects. But the nicest person probably was Louis in DS Live anyway. But well, guys, I think that's about it. And
we still got 2.5 minutes, actually.
Oh, what was I thinking?
We're at 57:45 right now.
Okay, I was worried about Jay's phone. I don't want to.
Jay,
me too.
If your phone goes out, we'll say goodbye for you.
Okay.
It will. There's no sense in you coming back for 30 seconds. So.
Yeah, but thank you so much for being here. You've been a delight. And all of your stories were wonderful.
Thank you.
And I know everybody enjoyed it. And hi, Helen. Helen's an old friend of all of ours. And
I did want to mention something. You brought up, Jay brought up Mars Needs Women. Yeah. Plan 9 from Outer Space. One of the conventions I went to, the gentleman that played the police officer on Outer Space. His entire career was going to conventions wearing that police uniform.
Yep.
And I also, thank goodness, got to meet and chat with Forrest Ackerman.
Yeah.
From Famous Monsters magazine.
Forrest was a big Dark Shadows fan, and he used to go to the early DS fan.
Yes, I remember seeing him at least one ShadowCon.
Yep, and also.
And I'm getting the notice the phone is overheating.
Oh, God. Okay.
So I shall say my goodbye now.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me. I've truly enjoyed this.
You've been great. We'll talk to you soon.
Yep. Bye-bye.
I also got to meet the gentleman who created Outer Limits. I can't think of it. Joseph Stefano.
Oh, yeah.
And it was one of them situations. This friend of mine named Phil. That was Phil McCary. He rode motorcycles with Joseph Stefano's son. So I went to the convention, and the guy that was serving as the aide for Joseph Stefano, it turned out it was his kid. Yep. So I mentioned my friend, and he said, oh, yeah. So he introduced me to his dad, and I got to hold one of the Zanti Misfit ants from the
Yeah.
Outer Limits episode. You remember
Yep.
that? It was like a
Yep.
stop
I
action thing,
remember.
and I got to hold one of those ants in my hands. I mean, that's pretty nifty.
Oh yeah, totally. That's impressive. Yeah, I was gonna say next week or possibly the week after, we're gonna be having Barry Barsamian. I'm gonna talk to him on Tuesday, and Barry is the cousin of Mike Connors, and he's met a lot of people through the years.
Mannix?
Yeah.
Oh.
And he's met lots of people through the years, so he's gonna have some cool stories. And so we'll have lots of fun. And Catherine will be coming up in the weeks ahead, and a couple other people too that I won't talk about yet. But
we have to ask them about the Emmy presentation.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I know exactly
what
you're talking about. Not right here. I'll tell you after.
No, this we can talk about.
Okay.
When they showed Mike Connors, underneath his picture it said Chuck Connors.
Oh, that. Oh, no, I was thinking of another one.
And apparently Mike Connors could see a monitor because he looked up and then he looked down and he laughed.
It happened a lot like that back then. So, yeah.
Well, Chuck Connors was still acting back in that time period.
They were all
Mike
still
Connors
working.
When Mike Connors was Mannix. And you remember Mannix started out as one of the Name of the Game episodes.
Yeah.
It was the name of the detective agency. It was like ITX or something started with an I.
Yeah.
And then
it's been so long.
It did well, so they patterned it off on its own as Mannix.
Right. So, anyway, everybody, please give a good thought to. I'm going to get this in. I'm sorry, Mark. Sure. Give a good thought to Barry because he's going through a lot of stuff right now with a number of different health issues and such. So send a good thought toward him. And I'll talk to him on Tuesday. Catherine, I'll talk to you tomorrow if I can hunt you down. And say a big happy birthday to my favorite great nephew. And tell him he's got a gift certificate in your email. For Amazon.
I'll check my email when I get done.
Okay.
Okay. I'm gonna play the theme song and remove us.
Sounds good. See you next week, everybody.
All I gotta do is there we go. Bye, everybody.